One of these 5 people is probably in your life right now, maybe more than one. Seneca, a man worth more in today's money than most billionaires alive, wrote a letter almost 2,000 years ago naming the exact kinds of people who quietly drain a person's wealth and character, not through theft, not through bad advice, just by being near you. He was specific about it. He named 5 distinct types, and by the time we get to the 5th one, you're going to realize it's not the obvious villain you're expecting. It might be someone you actually admire. Stick around for that one. It's the one almost nobody talks about, and it's the one most likely to be affecting you right now without you noticing. Quick context so this lands the way it should. These 5 types come straight from Seneca's letters to his friend Lucilius, specifically the letter historians call On Crowds, which is one of the most quoted pieces of writing he ever produced. Seneca wasn't writing self-help. He was a man managing an actual fortune, watching real people around him gain and lose everything, and trying to name precisely what kind of company corrodes a person from the inside before they even notice it happening. We're going through all 5 in order, from the easiest to spot to the almost invisible one. Each one gets more dangerous than the last, and the final one is the reason this letter is still being read 2,000 years later. Let's start with the one you've definitely met. Person 1, the rich neighbor. Seneca wrote it plainly. The neighbor, if he is rich, awakens greed in you. Not generosity, not inspiration. Greed, his word, not a modern paraphrase of his idea. Here's what he meant, and here's why it still applies exactly the same way today. You're not jealous of strangers. You don't lie awake thinking about a billionaire you've never met. But the person one rung above you, the neighbor with the slightly nicer car, the coworker who just got back from a trip you can't afford, the old classmate posting from somewhere you've always wanted to go, that's the comparison that actually gets under your skin. Seneca's point wasn't that wealth is bad to witness. His point was that proximity changes the math. Distant wealth is just information. Close wealth becomes a referendum on your own life, and it can quietly redraw your idea of what's normal to spend without you ever consciously deciding anything. This is the easiest one to recognize, and the easiest one to dismiss as harmless. It isn't. It's just the first domino. Because once that referendum starts running in the background of your mind, the next person on this list is the one who actually pushes you to act on it. Person 2, the luxurious friend. Seneca's exact words, the indulgent friend weakens us, little by little, in ways we don't even feel happening. This is a different category from the rich neighbor, and it's more dangerous for one specific reason: proximity plus affection. You don't have an emotional relationship with your neighbor's car. You do have one with your friend's approval. Here's how this actually plays out. Your friend upgrades their lifestyle. Nicer dinners, better trips, a slightly more expensive version of everything. You don't consciously decide to match them. There's no moment where you say, I need to spend more to keep up. It happens through 100 tiny social moments where matching their spending is just easier than being the one person at the table ordering differently, declining the trip, or being the cheap one. Seneca specifically used the word imperceptibly. He wasn't describing peer pressure you can see coming. He was describing erosion, the kind you only notice after the fact, when you look at your spending and can't quite explain how you got there. This is the same mechanism economists later named lifestyle inflation. Seneca just identified the social vector 2,000 years before anyone gave it a textbook name. And if a friend can do this to you without trying, imagine what happens when someone is doing it on purpose. That's person 3, and this one isn't about money at all. It's about how you think. Person 4, the slanderous companion. This is the one most people skip past in Seneca's letter, and it might be the most relevant one for anyone trying to build wealth today. Seneca's words, "The companion who gossips and criticizes rubs on us." His exact phrase was that some of his rust transfers onto us, even when we ourselves are clean of it. Translate that into a modern circle, and here's what it looks like. You know that person, maybe in your friend group, maybe online, who has an opinion about everyone else's financial decisions. That coworker who got a promotion was just lucky. That friend who started a business is going to fail eventually. That person who's finally debt-free probably inherited money. You might not even agree with any of it, but Seneca's point is that you don't have to agree for it to affect you. Exposure alone does the damage. Spend enough time around someone who reflexively tears down every financial outcome they see, and you absorb the posture even while rejecting the specific opinions. And that posture is corrosive to actually building anything yourself, because the same cynicism that protects your ego from envy also quietly talks you out of taking any real chances. Now, here's where this letter gets famous. Person 4 is the one Seneca built his entire argument around, and the example he used to prove it is one of the most brutal passages he ever wrote.
The crowd. If you've read anything about Stoicism before, you might already know this. This letter is called On Crowds. This is the heart of it. Seneca opens with a confession most people wouldn't admit. He says he never comes home from being in a crowd with the same character he left with. Something in him gets disturbed. Something he'd already worked hard to control comes back. Then he gives his proof, and it's not subtle. He describes attending the gladiatorial games expecting some light entertainment between the main events, and instead watching the crowd around him scream for condemned men to be thrown back into the arena to be killed, purely for the audience's amusement. He wasn't writing about people he considered monsters in isolation. He was writing about ordinary Romans, the kind of people you'd pass on the street, who became something else entirely once they were absorbed into the energy of the crowd. His conclusion was blunt. Even the strongest character, he named Socrates himself as an example, can be shaken by a crowd that doesn't share his values. If Socrates wasn't fully immune, Seneca's argument is that none of us should assume we are. Here's the modern version of this, and it's exactly as relevant to money as it was to violence. Every viral investment trend, everyone's buying this, every group chat convincing itself that a decision is obviously correct because everyone in it already agrees. That's the crowd Seneca was warning about. Not because crowds are always wrong, because crowds remove the one thing that protects you from a bad decision, the discomfort of being the only one questioning it. You don't have to be in a literal stadium for this to apply. A Discord server, a comment section, a family group chat where everyone's already decided something is true, that's a crowd. And Seneca's bet was that almost nobody is strong enough to think clearly inside one. Now, here's the one that surprises people. Person 5 isn't the cynic, and it isn't the mob. It's almost the opposite. And once you see it, you won't be able to not see it. Person 5. The performer of virtue. This is the one Seneca warned about that almost never gets quoted, probably because it's uncomfortable in a way the others aren't. The first 4 people on this list are easy to feel superior to. This one isn't. In an earlier letter, Seneca warned his friend about a very specific trap: people who turn wisdom, or in our case, financial discipline, into a performance, not living it, displaying it, dressing differently, talking differently, making sure everyone around them notices how disciplined, how frugal, how above it all they've become. Seneca's phrase for this was that it's vanity dressed up as virtue. Here's the modern version, and it's everywhere if you start looking for it. The person who posts every frugal win like a trophy, the finance influencer who's performing minimalism for an audience while their actual finances are a mystery. Even, and this is the uncomfortable part, the friend who makes sure you know exactly how disciplined they're being with money, in a way that's less about the discipline and more about being seen having it. Why is this the most dangerous person on the list? Because the first 4 are easy to defend against once you've named them. You can mentally flag the rich neighbor, the indulgent friend, the cynic, the crowd. But the performer of virtue doesn't trigger your defenses because they look like exactly the kind of person you're trying to become. You don't guard against them, you imitate them. And if what they're performing is hollow, spending discipline as image rather than substance, you end up copying the show instead of the actual habit. Seneca's test for this, and it's a good one to steal. Does this person's financial behavior change when no one's watching? If the frugality, the discipline, the wisdom only shows up where it can be seen, it was never the thing itself. It was the performance of the thing. And performances don't compound. Only the real behavior does. So, here's the full list, in the order Seneca would want you to actually use it. The rich neighbor who quietly recalibrates what feels normal. The luxurious friend who erodes your spending without either of you noticing. The slanderous companion who hands you cynicism instead of risk. The crowd that removes your ability to think alone. And the performer of virtue, the one almost nobody warns you about because they look exactly like the person you're trying to become. Remember the question from the start of this video? Which one is in your life right now? Here's Seneca's actual answer, and it's more useful than cut everyone off. He said you must either imitate the world around you or be repelled by it. There's rarely a neutral option. So the practical move isn't isolation, it's an audit. Pick the 5 people you spend the most time with financially adjacent to, the ones whose spending, comments, or wisdom you're most exposed to, and ask one honest question about each. Am I a better steward of money after time with this person, or a worse one? Most people have never asked that question about a single person in their life. You just asked it about 5. If today's video was about who to watch out for, the next one flips it completely. The one habit Seneca used to build trust with people worth keeping close. The kind of relationships that make you wealthier instead of poorer. That one's coming next. Subscribe if you want to be there when it drops.